Is your facility storing oil, but you're not sure what regulations might apply? Maybe you've heard about SPCC plans, but you've never really dug into the details. Or maybe you're just looking for a quick refresher to make sure that you're still on track. Either way, you're in the right place. We're going to cover everything, and I mean absolutely everything, that you need to know about SPCC plans here today. This is your modern-day guide to understanding a rule that's often overlooked, rarely enforced, but still absolutely essential to businesses and operations across the United States. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what an SPCC plan is, who needs one, what it should include, how much it might cost, how long it takes to get one, and a lot more. And if you still have questions afterward, that's natural. If you want to just talk to someone to make sure you understand all this stuff, we're here to help. All right, let's get started with the basics and start off with what is an SPCC plan? Well, it stands for Spill Prevention, Control, and Countermeasure, and it's part of the Federal Clean Water Act, specifically 40 CFR Part 112, and it's enforced by the federal government through the US EPA. Now, I get it, that already sounds very confusing, but the idea is pretty simple at heart. It spells out where your oil is stored, how spills are going to be prevented, what to do if one happens, and who's responsible for every step of response along the way. And no, these plans are not one size fits all. Each one is going to be tailored to your specific site. So if you've got oil on site, your SPCC plan is your roadmap for keeping that oil out of waterways and keeping your facility out of legal or financial trouble in case an emergency happens. So, what is an SPCC plan really? Well, it's a document. It's a physical, printed 3-ring binder full of paper or a book or something like that lives on site. Yes, you can and should keep a digital copy, but the EPA is going to expect to see a physical copy at your facility. And the reason's pretty simple. If there's a power outage, if the internet goes down, or even if the person who has access to the computer is just out sick, your digital copy won't help anyone. And if you can't present your SPCC plan when you're asked, you could get in trouble right out of the gate in case you're going through an inspection. We always recommend keeping a printed, up-to-date copy somewhere easy to grab. Now, maybe that's near the main office, in a control room, or along an evacuation route. Wherever it's convenient for you, you should keep that plan so it's readily accessible. All right, now let's take a look inside an SPCC plan and discuss some of the more common elements that you'll see. First off is the main one. What kind of oil do you have? Where is it stored? What type and how much do you have on site? There's going to be site-specific details like site maps and diagrams showing storage areas and maybe even spill pathways. You're going to have spill prevention and secondary containment discussed in detail. There's going to be information on spill response procedures. There's going to be emergency contact information and internal responsibilities outlined. You'll see inspection and maintenance checklists. There might even be details specifically on training requirements for staff members of different types. And documentation and record keeping is going to be clearly outlined, since documentation is often one of the most important requirements of your plan to adhere to. Basically, it's your customized step-by-step playbook for safely handling oil and making sure that you're ready for anything that could go wrong. So, who actually needs an SPCC plan? Well, it comes down to 3 main things. First off, your facility must have the capacity to store more than 1,320 gallons of oil in above-ground containers that are 55 gallons or larger, or more than 42,000 gallons in underground tanks. Second, there has to be a reasonable expectation that a spill could reach navigable waters or adjoining shorelines. Yes, that does include storm drains. And third, you're not part of the transportation sector. That means you're not actively moving oil by pipeline, rail, or barges. You're storing it on site for whatever reason. Now, here's where it can get a little tricky. What matters isn't how much oil you typically have on hand, it's how much you could store at any one time. It's all about maximum capacity, not average use or throughput or anything like that. So if you've got a 2,000 gallon tank that's only kept half full, it's going to be treated as if it's always kept filled to the brim. Same thing goes with 55 gallon drums. Each one of them is going to count. Just 24 of them is going to put you north of that 1320 gallon threshold. There's why a lot of facilities can fall under SPCC regulations without even realizing it. You might have pallets of drum, a couple of backup generators, or even those smaller 275 gallon oval tanks that you see a lot of times in maintenance garages. All those things can add up very quickly. And when it comes to oil-filled equipment, mobile units, or anything with a built-in reservoir, that can start to get kind of complicated. If you're starting to wonder whether something counts or not, it's probably a good idea to bring in an expert. The bottom line, if your facility could hold more than 1,320 gallons of oil, don't guess. This is a regulation that you need to take seriously, as non-compliance could be expensive or even dangerous to your staff and your operations. Let's talk about what the EPA means by a reasonable expectation to discharge to navigable waters, because this one trips a lot of people up. When you hear navigable waters, you might be thinking big rivers or maybe the ocean, but in environmental compliance, the definition goes a lot farther. The EPA is going to include things like streams, creeks, ponds, and maybe even dry wetlands sometimes. And it gets even trickier beyond that. If a spill can reach a storm drain, that counts too. Even if there's no water in sight, oil could enter a storm drain and travel for miles through drains and ditches and eventually hit a regulated water body. So if oil can leave your property in any form and eventually reach any kind of water, even indirectly, the EPA is going to consider that a reasonable expectation of discharge. Now, we've seen a lot of companies try to argue that they're too remote, too isolated, or SPCC just doesn't apply, and honestly, that never works. Inspectors usually disagree, so we always tell people, when in doubt, assume that SPCC rules apply, because more often than not, it does. Now, who exactly is this SPCC stuff for? Who's regulated? And the answer is simple. It's almost everyone. From small manufacturing and repair facilities, to farms, to high-tech data centers, hospitals, schools, marinas, heavy industrial operations, commercial office building, government offices, and even tiny recycling facilities. SPCC applies to everyone across the United States, except for single-family residential and transportation sector operations. The point is simple. If you've got oil on site, then SPCC probably applies to you. Let's talk about the different types of SPCC plans that are available out there. Well, simply put, not every facility needs the same type of plan. In fact, the EPA uses a tiered system primarily based on how much oil you store and the size of your containers. Here's how it all breaks down. Tier 1 is the simplest. If your facility stores less than 10,000 gallons total and no single above-ground container is over 5,000 gallons in size, then you qualify for a Tier 1 SPCC plan. It's self-certified, it's straightforward, and it's a great fit for smaller or lower risk operations. There's even a free template on the US EPA's website, but in all fairness, it's not very good. And we've even seen the US EPA, in a couple of instances, say that it's not sufficient. Now, Tier 2 plans still fall under the 10,000 gallon threshold, but if any containers are over 5,000 gallons in size, you're going to be bumped up into this next category. This is also self-certified, but it does require more detail. Unlike Tier 1, there's no free template out there, but it's still something that you might be able to manage in-house and build from scratch if you know what you're doing. Your last option is what's called a full professional engineer certified SPCC plan. And this is for facilities that store more than 10,000 gallons of oil, or if you've had any oil spills in the past, then you're generally going to be required to have a plan certified by a professional engineer. These plans are more technical, more detailed, and must meet specific requirements. Now, this is where working with someone like us at RMA can make a big difference, because we can ensure that your plan is well made and certified by a licensed professional from your state. Now, there's one important thing to discuss here, and that's that some states have their own rules. The EPA allows states to decide whether or not to require professional engineer certification, even for simple Tier 1 or Tier 2 plans. Kentucky, for example, says that all SPCC plans must be signed off on by a professional engineer licensed in the state of Kentucky. So even if you qualify for a self-certified plan, your state might say otherwise. And this isn't just about SPCC. Some states have their own spill prevention rules that very closely resemble SPCC regulations, but go by different names, such as PPC plans in Pennsylvania, PIPPs in Michigan, DPCCs in New Jersey, or SPC plans in Louisiana. Now, none of these are federal SPCC plans, but they're very similar and you may need both. Sometimes you can even combine them into a single document, sometimes you can't. The key is knowing what applies to your specific location and making sure that you're covered from all angles, whether it's state or federal. Okay, let's talk about what kind of oils are actually covered under SPCC regulations, because this throws a lot of people off. SPCC plans are strictly for oil. They do not cover hazardous chemicals. They do not cover antifreeze. They do not cover diesel exhaust fluid. They don't cover dirty water or clean water or anything else like that. We're just talking about oil. That's it. Now, that sounds simple until you realize how broadly the EPA defines oil. Most people assume we're just talking motor oil or gasoline, but the list is actually much longer. For example, the list includes all types of oils, which would of course start off with petroleum products that we're all thinking of: diesel, gasoline, kerosene. motor oil, jet fuel, lubricants, hydraulic oil, and so on and so forth. It's also going to include all forms of synthetic oil, such as modern lubricants and fluids used in various pieces of equipment. We're also going to include things like animal fats and vegetable oils, yes, even cooking oil that we make our foods with. If you store enough of it, it counts towards SPCC thresholds. And the material doesn't have to be new or virgin either. We can have used oil stored on site, whether you're collecting it for recycling or disposal, or even just burning it in a heater. It's included under SPCC regulations. Now, if that used oil is mixed with water or some other material and becomes a hazardous waste, then SPCC doesn't apply, but other rules probably do. In fact, some state-level plans, such as the previously mentioned DPCC plans in New Jersey, might cover other materials, but under federal SPCC considerations, it's all about oil, and you'd be surprised at just how many oils are out there. So, how do you actually get an SPCC plan? Well, the good news is it doesn't have to be hard or expensive, especially if you can get help from someone who does this regularly. But your path forward is going to depend on how much oil you store and the size of your containers. If you can use a Tier 1 SPCC plan, you can write it yourself. Remember, this is a self-certified document, but I just want to stress to be careful. Just because you're allowed to prepare your own plan doesn't mean it's easy. If it's sloppy or incomplete, you're still going to be on the hook during an inspection or during an accident. That's why a lot of folks out there bring in a professional just to be safe. The same thing goes with a Tier 2 SPCC plan. You can technically write this yourself, but at this level, the requirement's a little bit more detailed. You're going to be building a plan and a document from scratch, and it's very easy to miss something important. In these instances, we generally recommend getting professional help. And if you were to store more than 10,000 gallons, or if you've had a spill in the past, you're going to be required to have a full professional plan developed and stamped by a PE. There's no DIY option for this one unless you happen to be a PE yourself. Now, let's switch gears a little bit and talk dollars and cents and discuss how much an SPCC plan actually costs up front and in the long term. It's really going to depend on what kind of plan you need and whether or not you do it yourself or hire a professional. Let's assume that you want to hire a professional to help you out and you need a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 plan. An environmental professional is usually going to charge anywhere between $2,500 and $7,500 as a ballpark idea, depending on the complexity, location, and how fast you need it. Now, for a professional engineer certified SPCC plan, you could be looking at $4,000 to $15,000 or more, but again, it all depends. Here at RMA, the bulk of our SPCC work has historically fallen into those ranges, and our customers again have historically said that their plans that they didn't purchase from us have kind of fallen to that price range as well. So we think that's a pretty fair ballpark estimate about what you can expect to pay for an SPCC plan anywhere in the United States. Another consideration in this day and age is a remotely developed plan. For example, here at RMA, we can often create SPCC plans remotely without visiting your site, which can help keep costs down. Or for bigger operations, if you have multiple facilities, we can offer bundled pricing, again helping keep that per facility cost down somewhat. Now, let's talk some long-term costs for a second. Since an SPCC plan isn't a permit, it's not an approval, you're not going to have those fees to pay like you would with something like an NPDES permit. You also don't need to submit it or get it approved by anyone, so you aren't shelling out any application fees at any point during the process. Your long-term costs are going to be tied solely to updates requiring outside help, such as if you need a PE for recertification, your annual training costs if you purchase training online or something like that, and basic compliance upkeep like purchasing spill kits or restocking the materials within them if you use them. Generally, this cost is going to be around 10 to 30% of the cost of the SPCC plan annually. So if you spent $5,000 on an SPCC plan, you could expect ongoing annual costs to be anywhere between $500 and $1,500 as a ballpark idea. Now, is it worth hiring someone to do all this? Of course, my answer is biased, but I would say absolutely yes, it is. If you get this wrong, the fines can be crippling. If you had a spill and they really wanted to throw the book at you, you can be fined up to $68,445 per day per violation. If something is wrong with your plan or if you don't have one, that can add up extremely quickly. We're talking millions of dollars in a matter of weeks. And spills aren't exactly cheap to clean up either. Even a small one can cost thousands to clean up and remediate, especially if oil gets into a drain or a waterway. Without a proper plan in place, you're opening yourself up to fines, business disruptions, and reputational damage, all things that no business can afford. In fact, we've had a lot of clients come to us after a spill or inspection, and it's always far more stressful and far more expensive than just getting that plan done right in the first place. If you're thinking, I think I need one of these SPCC plans, but you're wondering how long it's going to take to get one, let's address that. If you're doing it yourself, that's really going to depend on you. Some folks can buckle down and get it done in a week. Others are going to be stuck in analysis paralysis and drag it on for a couple of months. It all comes down to how familiar you are with your requirements, how organized your facility and information is, and how confident you are in writing a plan that can actually pass muster. Now, if you're working with a professional, things are going to be a little bit different. The timeline is usually going to depend on two simple things. One, how complex your site is, and two, how busy your consultant is. A rush job might just take a few days, but in most cases, a full-service SPCC plan, especially if it requires a site visit, is generally going to take about a month from scheduling to delivery. Some can take less time, some are going to take more time. It just all depends. Now, if you're available for a remote SPCC plan, you're in luck. Here at RMA, these can often be done in under a month, generally within a week or two, especially if you've got your information ready to go for us. Remote plans are faster, often far more affordable, and are just as compliant. Now, once you've got your SPC plan in hand, here's what you actually need to do with it, because having one isn't enough. First off, you need to keep it on-site and accessible, as we've already discussed. It can't be locked away in a filing cabinet that no one can ever open or saved on a cloud drive that only is accessible by the boss. Inspectors want to be able to see it, and your team needs to be able to grab it and use it in case of an emergency. Second, you need to use your SPCC plan during a spill. This is your emergency playbook. It will keep you out of trouble. It should tell your team exactly what to do, who to call, what steps to take, and how to report any spill incidents. The clearer and more familiar you are with your plan, the better your response will be when stress is high. Third, you need to perform monthly inspections. That means checking all your oil storage areas and secondary containment for leaks, wear, or corrosion, or anything that could cause a problem down the road. Remember, the P in SPCC stands for prevention. And yes, you do have to document those inspections every time. Your SPCC plan isn't a one-and-done document. It needs to stay current, and that means updating it at any time that something changes. If you move or add tanks, switch up staff responsibilities, update emergency contacts, or make changes to your containment system, your SPCC plan needs to be updated. The EPA expects your plan to reflect your current, actual site, not how things looked 3 years ago. Even if nothing changed, you still need to review your plan at least once a year. Pull it out, go through it line by line, check your site map, confirm your emergency contacts are up to date, make sure your team is trained and ready for an inspection or accident. That annual review shows inspectors that you are on top of things. Another inspection tied to a date or a milestone is your 5-year review. Once every 5 years, you're required to do a full review and update of your plan to make sure that aligns with modern best practices. Now, this is your chance to fix anything and everything in the document. Make sure it reflects your site conditions, make sure it reflects your current procedures and processes, make sure it reflects all your contact information. You're also going to need to provide training for you and your staff at least once a year, and this shouldn't just be a boring old PowerPoint deck. Your team needs to know how to respond to a spill, how to inspect storage areas, and where to find the plan in case of an emergency. Train on your fueling and transfer techniques. If you add new staff or make changes to your plan, then you need to do some additional training as well. A popular method is the train the trainer approach that we like to stand behind, where one person completes a formal training course and then turns around and trains the rest of the team in-house. It's efficient, it's extremely cost-effective, and it shows that you're keeping up with your responsibilities by taking third-party training every year. There are plenty of online SPCC training options out there that won't break the bank. And finally, when it comes to documentation, document everything. Keep records of inspections, training sessions, spill response, and any changes to your SPCC plan. If you're ever inspected or need to show your work during a spill investigation, those records are going to matter. Those records, requirements say, should be kept for a minimum of 3 years. After that, we still think it's a pretty good idea to hold on to those documents, but it's not required. The bottom line, use your SPCC plan, keep it updated, follow its procedures, and make it a working part of your environmental program, not just a binder that gathers dust on the shelf. Now that you've got a clear picture of what an SPC plan involves, here's the bottom line. This isn't just a best practice, it's a legal requirement. Just like driving the speed limit or paying your taxes, the penalties for doing the wrong thing can be severe. And this is not about scare tactics, it's just the reality of environmental compliance. These rules are out there and they exist for a reason, and if you store oil, you're expected to follow them or pay the price. If you're not sure where your operation stands, the next step is simple. Check, find out. And if you can't figure it out on your own, reach out to us. That's what we're here for. At RMA, we've helped hundreds of companies throughout this exact process. So whether you're starting from scratch, updating an outdated plan, or you just need someone to walk you through the requirements, we've got your back. We've worked on thousands of SPCC plans across the United States, and we get it. This stuff is hard to figure out sometimes, but SPCC compliance does not have to be overwhelming. Let us help you get it done right and get it off your plate. Reach out today and let's make SPCC simple.